Well, now you don't have to wait any time at all. The orb has captured you under the sight line of OBS. It stands for Orb Broadcasting Station, Las Vegas.
You're not recite to do seeing someone peeing.
It's, well, I feel like we're like two orbs, or two testicles of a invisible man that have been painted to.
Was this what you had in mind when you pressed the start of the record button, calling us testicles? Was that what you had in your head?
Not before I actually did it. So no, it wasn't in my head. It was only ever outside of it. It was
brilliant.
I mean,
welcome
kind of us being orbs.
To the Barrel Vision podcast, where we're still talking about a game that has not had an update in a year. This year.
Well done. Live service games. Oh wait, hold on a second. Sorry, shit. Technically, we should be talking about the newsletter first. But all I need to do for that is just show you a picture of a gun, which actually, I suppose it's not too hard. But I think we are supposed to do that. I can put it on screen. There you go. But it's in the thumbnail, so and also in the previous, obviously, newsletter video, people know what it looks like. Look at that rogue core weapon of sorts.
A hammer.
Obviously not finished. I can't remember what it's. I always forget. It's got like a name. Obviously, it's got a name. It's like hammer. Hammercaster. There you go. It's basically just a fucking big, like, bolter rifle. It's a warhammer weapon, basically. But they definitely mentioned that before, and that's pretty epic. Mainly because everything we've seen already is just pistols, right? You know? So, yeah. Not that I'm surprised to see other weapons. Obviously, there were going to be, but we'd seen a lot of pistols, like quite a weird amount, you know. So to see something that isn't one, and something that's kind of cool, but also like I think this helps people keep in mind. You might be thinking, how is that not like just a weird like Frankenstein? As far as functionality goes, a weird Frankenstein of like the GK2, the M1000, and I guess the Thunderhead as well. It's like heavy bullets, and I say it's exactly that. Because it's a roguelite, it's going to have a shitload more weapons, and therefore some of them are going to be pretty similar.
Be that distinct, yeah. No. Because each weapon in Deep Rock matters so much that it has to be visually and gameplay distinct from the one next to it. Meanwhile, this game, you're probably going to get that entire fucking like rainbow of weapons, right, and fielded in each one. Like I'm sure all those pistols, despite their differences, are going to feel essentially the same, right? They're going to shoot roughly the same speed, do roughly the same amount of damage, just in slightly different ways.
I can tell already it's going to come down to like weapon like attributes, right? It's like whether this is like a projectile weapon or a hit scan weapon or a precision weapon or a close range weapon or an energy weapon or something like that, and these will all be affected by different upgrades. I think that's literally going to be.
They'll be like kind of blurring them as like it's a little much like because obviously we saw in the trailer thing that is literally what they're doing, right? They are creating a weapon and then they're giving it like what was it like? I'm trying to think of an example. I guess the M1000 would be like ballistic, long range, and that might be it actually. It's quite a simple weapon, but as long as they're just like constantly like changing those, there's never really two weapons with the same exact like tags, I guess you would call them, right?
I think that's kind of the idea, because I think that's literally how RoboQuest does it, because they've got loads of those things, loads of attributes and sort of ways a weapon can be. It's like a normal like standard rifle weapon. Like some of them don't have anything going on, but they all technically do. Because sometimes it's just like This one has a slightly higher crit multiplier. This one's heavy. This one's dual wield. This one's energy based. But then you'll also get like an energy based dual wield weapon. You'll get a heavy dual wield weapon. You'll get a precision charge based energy weapon. You'll get a precision, which is like the Gauss rifle. You'll get a precision charge based ballistic weapon, which is a bow. But it's like, and it's literally the only difference there is one is ballistic, like one uses a magazine, one uses energy. That's like how RoboQuest differentiates things. And is that like the ideal that every weapon list is actually technically different in some way, even if it's just one difference?
Kind of. I feel like
is that too much? I don't know if that's too niche. But it's you can get so many combinations with like not that many.
It's not like mandatory, but I think it's just bring something to aim for. Right, so like if you I don't know,
because the difference could even be just like the list is shorter, you know?
Right, like if you got a legendary modification or something, whatever they're called, out the gate, that's like pistols do 300% more damage, and it's like, okay, you've clearly got a pistol build, you still have a wide range of options within that, right? Like, yeah. You can do, ballistic pistol, which would just be like the Sabata, like energy, electric, like you could have like do a ton of different things on top of the stuff, and like ranges and all that. Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential, and it's good that so far all we have seen is new weapons. Like, have we seen them do like any re-skins or of old ones? I know we're definitely going to get them. Like, that much is not, in question. But
the other thing that we know, I guess, specifically from this newsletter, something that we're already anticipating is that literally everything is going to be visually overhauled, which is kind of something that we already knew. But really, the point of that was like kind of the update on that's what they're doing right now. Is just a complete visual overhaul of mainly, I guess, when it comes to overhauling, that's mainly the stuff that's been brought over, I suppose. Which isn't going to be a small amount, but it's also, there's going to be enough new stuff combined with the fact that they're redesigning everything. This is going to make the game look very different. And I think I'm interested to see, like, a basic weapon, like the GK2, for example. How different would that even look? And does it actually need to look different? Or does it just need to look, I guess, more finished? Or would the Reclaimers have a slightly different base version of it? But
I mean, so far,
like maybe how it'll work, they'll take parts away from them but I don't think attachments are going to be a thing either. So it's like, I doubt it.
I don't really know where I'm getting this from inherently, but I feel like the Reclaimer art style feels more triangular, and like Deprox is a bit more square, like things are a bit more blocky, and like kind of more like factory crafted, and these ones lean a bit more towards like sleek military weapons.
I think I don't know if it could literally just between the difference between angular and straight. Or straight and gay. No, but it's like you think about any weapon, even a weapon like the Drac, for example, where it does have like obvious slopes. They're not at a weird angle. They're still completely straight blocks of material. Whereas like,
although I feel like the Drac might not change that much, because I do think it does like. I think maybe they're going to feel a lot more. Tier 3s are probably not going to change too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. Meanwhile, Gen 1s are probably going to maybe even get like arguably overhauled. Like into some design.
Oh, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a grenade launcher in Brocore. Hopefully, more grenade launchers that are good.
I think there'll be.
If it's a PGL, it's going to look
be
different.
A drum mag grenade launcher,
yes,
right?
Please. I mean, look, that's something that should so objectively.
Grenade launcher with multiple shots.
Yeah.
Is simple.
Yeah. And it's like it's just an obvious thing as well. Hopefully, it'll be better.
And then if you like want to change it from just being a regular explosion, there would be like, I don't know, like EMP shots or something, like shoots little electric explosions. Or if you don't mind, just the main difference being mag size.
Well, yeah, because like if we're still on the gun differences, it could literally just come down to a difference between two guns could actually literally just be that one has one less attribute than the other. You could get that granular to create the differences that are needed. It's like these two pistols are actually exactly the same, except for the fact that one of them isn't a long range weapon, but obviously it would have like, I guess, its stats would reflect that in some way. It probably would be like higher damage, but like lower weak point multiplier or something like that, you know. But like the actual list of attributes, the only difference would be that one of them has one less than the other, but it's still technically different. So it's actually really not hard. I mean, I don't know if RoboQuest has this on lock where literally every weapon is technically different in that way, but I think they do, and I think it's very achievable as well. And it's a way to just create that like sense of, even though there are so many weapons that can fulfill what you're looking for, there's technically no like homogeneity. There's technically no identical like weapons. And even if you don't always realize it, you will feel it, because as long as their weapons are never identical, it means there'll always be a reason to make a choice between them.
It's really the only way to fuck up making a bunch of weapons for a game like this, like a roguelike, is if you pick up a weapon and it is identical gameplay and playstyle and almost looking wise to like 2 or 3 other ones. That's the only way to fuck it up, really. Because even balance is bound to be shoddy, right? Like in RoboQuest, like there are tons of weapons that are fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's like, but it's like you can't really
within that. So
exactly. I mean, I don't like the thumper, right? Which is, by the way, the drum mag grenade launcher. But doesn't mean I don't think it shouldn't be there, because it's just nice to have such a wide variety and a wide pool. And look,
the same with like the rapier.
I mean,
like, just a really shoddy melee weapon that they didn't really need to add, but at least it feels different to the other ones.
The rapier is literally just there to be a precision-based like melee weapon, which is like, it's not even necessarily a good idea. It's not even, but it's like, in a game where there's so many, you don't actually want a small pool just because you can't create a balanced big pool. What the goal of a roguelike for me is, when it comes to like the weapon pool, is more so like just a range of varied weapons, rather than like a tight pool of really balanced weapons, because that's what Deep Rock is, right? So I don't think there's any reason to go middle of the road, which is like, you know, only like a few more weapons than Deep Rock, right? You want to go like, at least Deep Rock's got 24 weapons, right?
Yeah, I think we've already seen like 6, right?
Yeah, I mean, Roko's got to have like at least 50 weapons at launch, you know, that kind of thing. Okay, maybe it's actually a bit higher than I think. That might
probably.
At least 40.
Thinking, like,
at least 40.
in the 40s on like alpha launch, or like, you know, like when everyone can get their hands on it, and then by 1.0 sitting at 50s plus.
50s plus, and obviously hopefully being added a bit more regularly,
if
they need to be, unless like the selection is crazy, unless like the selection at launch is like amazing, you would expect there to be a more regular cadence
on like how much the modifiers can change the weapons. Like, you know, when you get a legendary weapon, or like, you know, those tiers, like they'll gain a bunch of modifiers. It's like this, just use the imaginary drum mag grenade launcher versus the PGL. If the PGL can get like +5 ammo in the mag, it would almost invalidate the drum one existing.
And that's why you have to consider things like that's why you have to consider things like hard limits on certain stats. It's just like, is the PGL always going to be stuck at 1 magazine size? But then again, is there enough numerical differences between the weapons already where it's like, that for the PGL, that is like the highest tier of upgrade, because it's giving you like multiple PGL shots in a row. But like the drum mag one is like, it's got 6 in it already, but they're much weaker grenades, so it's like, it's still inherently quite different if that functionality is achieved by, like, on the PGL, only by a really high-end upgrade, you know? So it still kind of keeps them unique until you find that higher-end upgrade. So for most of the time you're using it, it will be, like, they'll be quite different.
It feels like, you know, most of these modifiers are going to be, like, general, like, sandbox pool, kind of, like, any gun can take any of them, interesting kind of thing, but It would be kind of interesting to see, like, if the later, more legendary stuff is unique and where it impacts that weapon
I'm
in
not
a
sure if it
very
is or not.
specific
I don't know if
way.
that's
I mean, I feel like
I don't know if that's something that's been technically debunked or not. You know, where it's like where we know that's not the case. I don't think so. So that could happen. That could be the case.
yeah, I feel like there's a chance that like we've already seen an example of like I don't know the flamethrower or the cryo cannon had like an increased freeze chance or freeze power, which you wouldn't find on another weapon. Like I'm not sure there probably will be stuff like that that have to work around. With that being said, arguably you should find that on other weapons. I think it would be quite cool if any and all weapons can apply any and all status effects if they have the modifiers for them. But I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different conversation because once again, I mean, look, it's the easiest thing for me to draw up comparisons between, right? Because RoboQuest only has 3 status effects, right? That weapons can apply. They also have like stun, which is just based on something called impact, but that's not really the point. The point is really only 3, which is like fire, frost, and electricity. And so it's not that unreasonable that every weapon can have those. But with Deep Rock, we're immediately looking at more. Not that there's a difference where those are still the most common ones, but we are looking at quite a few, like corrosion and pheromones and other things. There are other ones. Neurotoxin.
Well, the thing is, bear in mind, there are some weapons, and this is just something because you mentioned it. There are some weapons which will not carry over 1-to-1. The crossbow. There is no way to make the crossbow work the way it does in Deep Rock in Rogue Core. Right, which would change stuff. Like they probably won't ever add like some of the I don't know the status effect where you shoot something and then it explodes after it dies after a certain period of time. Like it's unlikely that status effect will make it into Rogue Core.
What would you? I mean, I don't think that status effect is unlikely in some fashion.
I guess technically it might not be, but like you get what I mean, right? But like with the lack of being able to use mods and like overclocks, the crossbow cannot work the way it does currently.
Yeah, the crossbow is actually going to be one of the most interesting ones to see carried over if it is, and I think it will be because crossbows are so lit. You know, like I wouldn't even be surprised. I wouldn't expect it necessarily because, well, there's no reason I wouldn't expect it, but I'm not inherently expecting like a bow. I think bows are kind of cool in these contexts, but I'm not inherently expecting that. Very undwarven, right? Where a crossbow is actually very dwarven. But
by the way, repeat the crossbow, please. Repeat the crossbow, please.
Oh, that's
Look.
If the crossbow's in the game, that's almost definitely achievable. That's.
I guess.
And that's what it is, isn't it? That's what Rogue Core comes down to. Is like if everything is so much more simple to work with from the start. It's not based on a defined list of weapon upgrades for each weapon, but rather a massive pool of still unique attributes that can be achieved at the highest level of upgrades. The amount of different ways of using the weapons, and then even more so, there being more weapons, it's such an insane can of worms, isn't it? And it makes you question the fact that I'm getting a call. Pardon me.
That better have not been what you started with.
I'm actually not sure.
Why risk it? All right, we're back. So maybe we should get on topic.
Well, I was maybe about to segue very nicely because obviously we're talking about.
Speaking of segues,
there's no way you've got anything to mention about No, because I was going to talk about the amount. Okay, so obviously there'll be a lot more weapons on launch. There'll be plenty more weapons on Rogue Core's launch than there even are in Deep Rock right now. But
I feel like there is a chance that they actually won't have some of the original weapons on launch.
Maybe. Well,
especially since, as mentioned, the crossbow is I don't even know how you go about doing that.
Well, I guess
because sure you could just add the crossbow normally, but then I don't think it would be anywhere near as valuable as the other ones would be. I
guess it's just gonna be this expectation though, that the addition of such. So I think there's going to be this expectation, and I think a fair expectation, that a lot of the things that Deep Rock either gets very rarely or doesn't get at all in updates is something that Rogue Core will get on a more regular basis, which is things like weapons and classes, and possibly even our traits, like skills and whatever. That kind of is what classes are really in Rogue Core, though. But just like upgrades and things like that, they're pulled to be expanded. And I think the weird thing is, because obviously the subject's supposed to be live service, that stuff though is far more likely to happen. Just a continuous like sort of building up of the pool, like the game systems where there is a pool of things like classes and weapons and upgrades before it goes 1.0, which means like before the time when they would even consider making it a actual live service thing. It's just the early access stuff, which is just filling out the game. And then they could easily fall into a trap of sorts where it's like the trap that some people fell into, right, when they joined during season 1 or 2, of thinking that weapons are like a regular occurrence, right? That's just a thing that happened. But with Rogue Core, it will be. I reckon it will be like that, but that doesn't mean you're going to get weapons every update just because they're a more frequent addition.
Because like, I feel like even though I think most people in Ghost Ship, they were experienced game makers going into Deep Rock, which is technically the first game made under thingy. So it's not their first game, but it is their first game, if you get what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say. And I feel like that it is going to be the main difference between this and like this development and then, because back then they were just kind of adding stuff that they felt they needed, right, in like clumps. When they were like, oh, we should probably add something like this, they just added it, right? Like, oh, but they should probably just add a Korlok, or like some shit like that, right? Oh, we should probably add beers and like stuff like that. But I feel like now with seasons, their mindset has changed quite a lot with how they add content, right? Now it really feels like we need to like directly add like this stuff, like kind of like add stuff to this area. Or actually, it's probably opposite. Add like a layer, right? Back then they added a clump, like a bunch of stuff in this area, right? Like they when they just add an update, it's like just maps and like 2 maps and dreadnoughts. Was that one?
Yeah. God, what a fucking update.
Clump. Yeah, but it's like it was that clump, nothing else, right? No cosmetics, no stuff like that. I mean, maybe there was DLC, but in fact, there actually definitely was Dawn of the Dread, I think, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, but generally though, no cosmetics, nothing
DLC
really anywhere else. No.
Can't say that.
Have we already done that?
No, we haven't.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's worth doing, because that will literally be like how like worth it is it? That's almost going to be that. I think that's actually a good idea. Yeah. Anyway, carry on, my boy.
Yeah. So they kind of then they added clumps, but then now with seasons they add like a layer of content kind of everywhere, right? They're adding like 1 or 2 of everything. Generally, like you'll get a warning, a game mode, a map.
Okay.
Like
the version of seasons that is that specifically kind of really only happened once, to be honest.
Sure, but you know what I mean. Like not literally 1 of everything, but like a thin layer across the entirety of the game, right? Like that. There's been each season within the parameters of what they were trying to do. Some seasons failed miserably.
Season 4, they accidentally buttered the side of the plate instead of the toast.
Yes, definitely. But then season 5, that was a thick layer of butter.
Can I say? I want to say something about us. If anyone likes us enough to do this, I'll be surprised. But I would love to see a compilation of all our weird fucking analogies. That's like the only thing I think we've got that could be worth a compilation. If you know what I mean, because we do it a lot. We come up with these weird fucking analogies for everything,
because
and
they work.
Yeah, it's just an easy way to explain stuff,
Yeah, they like spreading it across. The cosmetics with the pass, the actual content in the season being like bits here and there. They've been weapon balancing like every season, right? Like that kind of stuff. There's been stuff everywhere for a while, especially season 5. That shit covered everywhere, all the way to the edges of the bread. And I wonder, are they going to go back to clumping with the development of Rogue Core? Like they are the first like update they do to Rogue Core they're like, okay, the game needs more classes. Like we've decided that the classes, so the best thing to add immediately is just tons of classes. So they all get to work, add like 3 or 4 classes, and then that's the update. Maybe 1 or 2 other things, but even those are clumped, compact things. Or do you think they'll go for the spread out approach, right? Like where they'll just be drip feeding content in every category for like until launch. Like they'll add like 1 class, like 1 weapon, 1 perk, like bundle of perks, cosmetics, like all of that at a lower level every so often, like how they do now, rather than just clumping like they used to. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, it's the difference between and we have to be careful here because it's not a difference that is actually observable in Deep Rock, but it's the hypothetical difference between early access and live service. Because early access is where it makes sense to clump, because that's kind of just how it goes. You can, once again, sorry about this, you can see that in RoboQuest. They don't really feel like a live service game because the updates kind of just focus hard into one thing. And that's how all of Deep Rock's updates were, though, but not even just up until 1.0, though. Because they kept I like this, by the way. I like clumping and layering. This is good. It's good stuff. They were clumping. It does sound like some weird other thing, though, doesn't it?
It's like a weird dance move.
Sure, dancing. Yeah. They were clumping even past 1.0, though. They were clumping. So I said I liked it. It's starting to sound weird.
You said it too much.
That's why. But they were clumping up until season 1. They clumped past 1.0, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like there was actually that much of a difference between how they did things in early access and actual post-launch, right? The difference only came when they realized that they wanted to do seasons, and obviously that is entirely a symptom of Ghost Ship's nature of not planning in that kind of way, where it's like we don't plan to make we plan like the next update or next few. We don't plan to like plan a model of development. Because even when they did, it's not like it created any kind of consistency in terms of timing, right?
Sure, but it created a kind of consistency in what they worked on, right? And like how, where, and I guess not when. Everything other than when, right? It gave them, just pump out these cosmetics. We'll do the pass. Like it gave it structure, and obviously the main goal was to keep people playing.
My main goal,
right? Like that was the goal of seasons, to keep player attention between updates. Because clumping's good and all, but once people tear through that clump within like a day, which was very doable, and we often did, it then became really difficult to keep playing until the next update. You would burn through all the content they added within a week.
Well, that's literally
meanwhile,
the nature. That depends on the nature of the clump, right?
Yeah,
because a weapon clump is a lot harder to burn through than the 1 grenade per class clump.
Yeah.
That's easily doable within a day.
The 1 grenade per class, that wasn't a clump. That was a layer, right? It wasn't just the grenades. There was quite a few other things for you to do, and then that included going through the pass. And that's the thing, is they're not going to do a pass for roll call until at least 1.0,
exactly.
And then maybe not ever, right?
No, maybe not ever.
So they won't really be in the mindset of player retention for a while, right? They probably don't even need to worry about it, think about it, right?
No, with these kind of games,
I'm sure, like with the frequency of the updates coming out, people are going to be like screaming with pleasure. Like can you imagine like current, like we're like I don't know like I guess the best way of putting it, but like we've gotten used to getting updates from Deep Rock every half a year, and now approaching a year, and like we are so content starved. What the fuck is going to happen to our systems when we're getting updates every 1 to 2 months, or 2 to 3, like latest, like in Rocore? Like it's going to be insane. And the only reason why that might not happen is because of Deep Rock, which is why I don't want to get into it, because I'm genuinely growing deeply concerned and kind of spiteful that they might stop working on Rocore to go on Deep Rock.
That's the kind of thing we do actually have to I think that's the kind of thing we literally have to wait on, because I'm not saying that the plan's going to change, that they're going to start working on season 6 once Rogue Core is out. But at the same time, I also don't think they're done with like explaining how that's going to go down either. I think there is more to say about how that's going to transpire,
genuinely,
even if they don't change the plan. Even if they don't,
because I
you know what I mean?
think that if Rogue Core is updated as much and as often as early Deep Rock, it will be huge, right? Because like current Deep Rock has gotten big. Like it got big. It is big. Well, maybe it was big, but the point is, it's a big game, and it went from being tiny to this. Like, you know, like really small, like 10 people or something, whatever the Steam chart says, like really early on, to like the 6 mil downloads, something like that, right?
Is it 5? 5, I think. I don't know if it's 6.
5? I thought. Either way, yeah, 5. And Rogue Core is going to be starting on that. Obviously, not literally. It's not 5 million people going to instantly download Rogue Core, but at least 5 million people are going to be interested in Rogue Core out the gate, right? Because they played Deep Rock and downloaded it and probably quite liked it. And I just think if Rogue Core out the gate is instantly put on the hold as soon as it launches, that is the worst possible thing you could do. Instantly. Meanwhile, I think if it gets updates constantly, and maybe those updates are layered or they're clumped, either way, as long as it's getting content like every other month, because I think even back in its prime, it wasn't monthly, was it? I don't think it was.
Well, it was so in flux, right? Because sometimes it would be at the very start. Sometimes it would be week to week because the game was so bare bones at that point, and that is why the difference between the state on launch is so important, and I think will dictate the difference between clumping and layering, right, as well, because the reason why they had to clump every update was like a clump of content in one specific area at the start is because the game wasn't done in any way.
Yeah, they had this like wad of clay, and they were trying to like they didn't have time for details, right? They were just plopping bits on, right? Like they probably had to redesign most of the things they added early on at least twice, right, throughout the years. Meanwhile, Rogue Core, there should be no redesigns, right? It seems like everything being added is going to be the permanent state that it is, which means it's going to take longer, right? It's not like 3 or 4 fucking polygons as like old Deep Rock was, right? Where it's like it's the implication of a feature, and this time it's the full feature, fully fledged on launch. Like
exactly. Well, that's why I think there's this natural expectation for it to be a far more finished product, and that's going to be like the difference between like after Rogue Core comes out. You know, I can't imagine there's any way we wouldn't continue to get like things like new guns and classes, but depending on how much there is at launch, is it going to be a situation where we're even thinking like, oh, I hope there's like a gun update soon, or is it like, oh, I hope there's some new guns in the next update? And that really depends on the like quality and quantity that is there at launch. It's like, it's just literally could what's on launch arguably be enough, and then any future guns are literally just like there because they had some good ideas, but not because the game actually needed them. Because, you know, Deep Rock obviously needed more weapons. It needed them both times, I think. But Rogue Core, it's in a position where I think their work ethic, their sort of team like size, and their sort of just proficiency is at a level where they could make a game that launches with like some parts of Rogue Core could potentially be considered complete on early access launch. Like something like the pool of guns, there could potentially be enough, and then everything else is just a bonus. Like, for example, there will be more after launch, but it might not be a case where they're like obviously needed either, you know? Unlike Deep Rock, where it's like, we obviously need more guns, you know? So it's like, and then when you see it like that, you realise that they might not need to do like clump like updates. Because I think might just be more finished.
Yeah, but I think the base game will be, right? Like the loading in, like to the caves themselves, like the weapons you have, like the run. I think the run is going to be like probably like I don't know, 80% complete to how it's going to be on launch,
so big.
like on 1.0. And this is not when we get our hands on it, or well, hopefully when we get it early. This is like end of this year launch. I think the in the game run is probably going to be like 80% like the content there, like
so
maybe not 80%, but like more done than not. But then I think outside systems, like for example, like before we had overclocks and deep dives and the forge and drinks and all of that stuff, I think that stuff that's going to be the clumps. They're going to be adding the other systems that tie into the runs and make them interesting and make them replayable long term. I think those are the things that, like, you can't spread that kind of content. That content is added, like, just because it is a clump in and of itself.
Well,
like,
yeah, obviously, God, that boat is actually so fucking massive. What the hell? Anyway, the point is, I guess you need to look to something like the deep dive equivalent as a good example, because obviously Rogue Core is basically deep dives on steroids, which is kind of crazy. The fact that obviously we're very confident it's going to be good. You look at how analogous it is to deep dive, so obviously it's technically completely different, but it's like also it is like a deep dive on steroids. But then the equivalent of that would be
not going to be a
I
problem.
know it's completely different. But the equivalent of that would be something like an endless mode, which is something they've already talked about. They are talking about that.
Definitely.
But they've also, like, I don't know who was talking. It was either like Bjorn or Anders or something, and they said, like, we've been talking about this, but it's definitely not going to be on launch though. Definitely not. Like,
yeah, definitely not. That's going to be a clump down the road, right? The same as it was with RoboQuest, which is obviously coming up a lot. If you don't know what RoboQuest is, it is a roguelike, which you can get on Steam and Xbox and so forth.
It's an amazing like FPS roguelite that's currently in early access. Actually, I think it has gone 1.0.
Also not co-op. Yeah, it went 1.0 and then it has done these updates, which have been kind of disappointing, to be honest. The point is, it is good. We played it. I think I played it enough. Harry cannot seem to play it enough somehow.
The point is, I think it's obvious why it's coming up though. It's got a lot of similarities to Deep Rock and Rogue Core distinctly.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of hoping like that. Rogue Core is going to play like Deep Rock mixed with RoboQuest.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of like the roguelike elements mixed with the gameplay of Deep Rock.
Well, I think I said it before. I don't know what I might have even said it in the big video, but it's like about how RoboQuest is like easily the best. Actually, I didn't say it. I didn't say the thing directly that I wanted to happen, but I said like RoboQuest is easily the best FPS roguelike I've played. A title that will hopefully be taken at some point later this year. That's kind of the idea, Not expecting like a literal earth-shattering masterpiece, but at the same time, you could still consider it a lofty expectation. I think we're probably both counting on it being definitely the best roguelite FPS, but also hopefully the best roguelite that we've played as well. Hopefully, the only one I would give a pass on there is Hades. I'm not expecting it necessarily to surpass Hades, but still,
I mean, the thing is it's literally other than roguelike that's like completely far. Like they could not be more far apart. Like,
yeah. But the thing is, Rogue Core should pretty much definitively beat out every roguelike FPS. Basically, it should be the king of that niche, really.
Yeah, because I think
it wouldn't have really been worth the trouble.
Yeah, well, it is doing something unique, right? It is inherently going to be the most co-op centered roguelike, right? Which that is actually something that might compete with, because there's also like the 33 player roguelike that's coming out soon.
But that's almost almost completely different. It's like,
I guess, but it's still like weird that two co-op centered roguelikes are coming out. I don't actually know when it's coming out. It might not be coming out. But the point is that it feels like they're putting their chips in the co-op centered FPS.
Almost more than Deep Rock did, in terms of really specking hard into it being co-op, because there's obviously Deep Rock doesn't really necessitate this, but what Rogue Core brings is this need for all of these systems where they didn't have to have like the systems that they're working on for how upgrades are chosen in turn.
Yeah, you could
they
like
could
all
have.
your upgrades could be just independent, and
It
you
could have
could
been
have played
completely independent.
independently
Yeah.
in a team, right? Which is what you do in Deep Rock, right? So your Deep Rock is very, very cooperative of a game, with abilities and that. But technically, there's nothing. You don't have to sacrifice anything of your teammate, or vice versa, right?
No.
Like that is not a thing in Deep Rock. That's not a thing in many games at all. And
Yeah,
I do
and
think
on a
they're
very
gonna make a
technical
great
level, the game barely
solo.
changes between solo and multiplayer. Really, it
Yeah.
doesn't really change. And I feel like it's probably going to change more in Road Core than it does
And
in
it
Deep
won't
Rock.
really change if like one of your teammates changes their build, right? That's not going to be that big of a thing.
No.
But say you're playing with your mates, one of your mates gets bored of their kind of play style, or they want to start encroaching on someone else's. That's going to be something.
Stay out of my territory.
Yeah, it's like once people start, wanting to try the same thing, like I don't know, I do think it's going to be really interesting. It's either going to pay off big time, right? Like that's going to be the actual main draw of it is the feeling of cooperation, or it's going to be one of the biggest downsides of Road Core, people fighting and quitting and trolling and doing stuff like that. We'll see.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
Well, actually, you know what I think? Okay, first of all, I think Deep Rock is seen as having like this very pure community, right? And I think that's actually fair because look, when you spend too much time in something, you start to see the bad parts of it. That's just how it goes. But objectively speaking, Deep Rock's community is a fucking diamond in the rough compared to so many others, right? That's just objective. Doesn't matter how much like annoying shit you've seen from it. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, when it comes to the purely discussion-based side of the Deep Rock community, so the part of it that's outside of playing the game, there is a lot of toxic positivity in that side of Deep Rock. There just is, and I think that with Road Core, we're going to actually see less of that because I think there will be more of that addictive in-game toxicity that seemingly makes things thrive, right? Like a lot of PvP and PvE games, like where people play together, there's a lot of toxicity there, but it's almost like fun in a way, and it's a really difficult balance to strike. But it's also not at all where, like in a game like Marvel Rivals, for example, people are going to get on each other's asses about how they play and what they choose and whatnot, but it's rare that it puts you off, isn't it? It's more likely.
Spider-Man
Yeah,
throw
but
yourself off a
it's
bridge.
rare that kind of atmosphere actually makes people like stop. It usually makes them keep going. People usually find it very engaging, and I think there is actually a healthy toxicity that comes with like these kind of systems that kind of make people fight, where you run the risk of some people going too far, but that's kind of more on them than the game. Where if it's done well enough, there'll be more scenarios where people are actually having fun with that sort of debate almost, rather than falling out. Because if that happens, that's kind of going to happen anyway. I feel like, I don't think that's the game's fault. Basically, I think they should be able to make a system like this and just trust that it will be more fun than not. Even if there will be some very toxic like examples, right? There will be falling outs over this system because it's just built into its nature. But that doesn't mean it's not good for the game either. Somehow, I know it sounds kind of weird, but there's a lot of games that are like this, and they do work out in the end. It just depends on what kind of people you are. Like people love playing fucking Mario Kart and Mario Party, but it also destroys friendships. But it's still a lot of fun. It's still.
Yeah, I think there's definitely stuff that I'm not sure they'll be willing to do, which could improve it. Like having a preferred like archetype, like that you can like pick and have like displayed. Like you would like I don't know, you'd be a driller basically, and it's like okay, you know what you're kind of signing up for when a driller joins your team. Like you can join and you would have like a tank icon next to you, right? Or like stuff like that, so you can kind of tell what build someone's going towards. Because ultimately, if you join a team of 4 and you have no information on each other, you all load into the game and you all find out that you were all gunning for the exact same build, right? Like you were all in the game expecting.
And
we're
we
gonna,
know that
we're gonna
doesn't
drill
work
vampire
because
melee.
yeah, exactly.
Like
Because obviously that
that's
works
it.
in a game with
Game's
independent
over.
upgrades, right? If it was independent, that would work, but it doesn't here because the selection is shared. It's limited, and
Only
not
one
every
person can
upgrade is
do
going to
that.
work for 4 people doing the same class. There aren't going to be the
Yeah.
upgrades for that. It doesn't have the bandwidth. So
Yeah. So unless they kind of facilitate like time to discuss or give a simple like icon, and I guess maybe what class you are might help slightly. But to be honest with you, the classes feel divorced of in-game builds. Like I think I could be running, drill, vampire, melee, so on so forth, and run the electric falcon thing, and it wouldn't change anything. Like it wouldn't, like, I don't think it would change, like, or indicate anything. You could do both. Basically, I don't think there'll be any way of telling what someone's going for until you find out too late, unless they work around that, which we'll have to see.
yes, we will see. And now, well, because I think that wasn't necessarily a discussion about live service, but it also kind of was because it's just about like the nature of how the game's gonna unfold, and I think we could either go off on our own, but I think everything that we could end up saying is going to be better introduced by a pretty healthy actually set of audience inquiries that we have on this topic. So thank you, everyone. And I think this is fair because I think I could easily force this discussion, and I don't think you'd have a problem engaging with it. But I think every point that could come up about talking about how live service has gone down with Deep Rock is brought up by the folks. So let's get started with someone who we haven't seen in a while, which is Foreign 440. And I guess this is about question 1, which is, do you think DRG benefited from taking on a live service model? And I guess we can sort of basically answer via his answer. I would say yes. The base game, pre-season 1, would have been enough for me. There was enough diversity in the weapon stash overclocks that makes it rewarding to try different builds, and there is a relatively high skill ceiling where Hazard 5 and Elite Deep Dives come into play. I found it extremely rewarding to push myself into those game modes. I think I may not have continued playing if they had not gone live service, though, as I still thoroughly enjoy playing DRG, and the extra weapons, overclocks, enemies, modes, and cosmetics have given me an excuse to continue. I've played with a lot of people over the 3 years it's been out on PS4 and 5, and there always seems to be a resurgence at the start of a new season where a lot of people come back. It's always been fun to reconnect with great players you haven't seen in a while. Counterpoint, would we have gotten a new game by now if Ghost Ship Games had not gone down the live service route? Maybe. I might have preferred a new game by now, but it's extremely hard to weigh that up. Regardless, I've had a fantastic time with DRG in the way Ghost Ship handled it. Are you fucking strangling yourself?
No, I'm having a drink and I'm sniffling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that all makes sense, because that is someone who has both liked both sides of it, but also thinks that the live service aspect was kind of needed at the same time, or highly beneficial.
I think there is a very simple way of gauging this. Would you define Deep Rock currently as live service?
Yeah, this is actually how I wanted to introduce.
It's been a year without an update. It will be another year without an update. We have no known date of the next one. Can you really define current Deep Rock as live service?
No, and then this brings into question of what a live service actually is, right? Because as far as you can tell, if you look across the industry, a live service is a game with a very regular cadence of not just new content, not just new updates that you download, but also a regular sort of influx of some kind of dynamic element, right? And that usually is a shop, that's usually a shop.
Yeah.
But in Deep Rock's case, it's actually just these fucking holiday events, I guess. But the point is, as far as cadence goes, there isn't a cadence for content updates for Deep Rock anymore. And that's because it's not a AAA live service game, right? I think it's been its journey as far as it being live service has been entirely dictated by that fact. And that's why you cannot call it a live service in comparison, to the other examples that dominate the industry. At the same time, you could very, very reasonably not like those examples on principle, and that's completely fair. I don't like most of them either. But you have to acknowledge, as far as what the concept is of live service, when you look at those examples, like Deep Rock doesn't do that version. What most people think of when you think of live service is not something that Deep Rock does, and certainly doesn't do well. Which is an extremely regular cadence and a dynamic element that you can sort of always check back in on every week, right? Something like that. Yeah. We just got nothing like that in Deep Rock. And there was no promise of that in detail, but there is kind of the implication when they are like, this is definitely a live service game now, even before they started seasons, and then you have a game that's already live service that transitions into seasons. You would think that would mean a lot more as far as like consistency goes, but it kind of just hasn't, and that's why I'm really glad that they are not like, they're just not bothering to say, they're just not bothering to be like, yeah, Rocal is a live service. They're just not going to say that or like make it a label, and I think that couldn't be more sensible. Almost like, nope, not a live service. It could easily be considered one, but at the same time, I reckon if they don't call it one, it won't be considered one. Because it's not like it will have any... I think for at least like the first 2 years of Rocal's life, it will not have any similarity to a popular like example like Marvel Rivals, as a live service game. It's going to have none of that. And we've even talked about the fact that it might not ever really become in something like that. It might not have seasons. It would be weird if it didn't, I guess, because it did, because, as Foreign laid out, that was very beneficial for Deep Rock. But yeah, we're also looking at a game that should have a leg up anyway. So, does making seasons for Rocal come down to they actually think it's a good idea, or would it really just make more sense if they need to get more numbers, Is it a difference between like, we will be happy just with the boost that we're going to get from riding off of the IP, or do we need Rocal to be its own entire like live service like hub, And I definitely don't need it to be, but you can look at Deep Rock and see why they would at the same time. So it's like, where it goes is really hard to say. I'm just glad that we know it's not going to be like that from the start. Which is not surprising. You can't really do that from the start. You can't really go live service and early access at the same time. It basically just has to morph into the other thing, over time. But we don't even know if that's going to happen. And I guess that is kind of like the next part, which is obviously the second question, which was, do you think Rocal should do the same? And by that I just meant like, do you think it should, be a live service game? But it was still like, if so, how should it be done? To which Foreign says, actually, this makes perfect sense. I reckon that Ghost Ship Games would have to make that decision based on the popularity of the initial release. If it doesn't do well as the original, it might make more sense to immediately start work on a whole new project. If Rocal turns out as well as DRG, I think I would be in favour of live service. I would like them to focus more on the story elements of seasons and perhaps even weave in a similar progression system to DRG, but culminates in a boss challenge that sees you going up against a new enemy / mode and rewards you with something big. The theme of Rocal is all about excavating the core, obviously. Make that the crux of each season. We've gone deeper through his new biome / enemies / geological hazards. I'd also love a more sentient feeling antagonist for Rocal, like a dastardly space elf or something. I don't know. The rivals of Rockpox and Bugs have always felt voiceless, and I think a well-written adversary to DRG, the in-game company, would work really well. Make them / it / him / her extremely arrogant and snide. That could be... So that's... Okay, getting a bit more into just sort of more, like, lofty desires for content and nature of content there, but I think that also all made sense, although I'm not sure I completely agree either. Like where he says, if roll call turns out as well as DRG, I would be in favor of live service. I think I might be on the opposite end. You know, I would be more in favor of them going that route and trying to do seasons if it was kind of something that they needed to do, rather than it just makes sense because the numbers reflect that. You know, I don't want them to do seasons without feeling the need to. But then again, them needing to wouldn't be a nice. It's kind of a cynical idea as well, that they'd be in a position where they need to do seasons. You know, that's not what we want.
The thing is, do roguelikes have better retention naturally or worse?
I don't know. I don't.
Because I feel like as long as there's content, people really don't stop playing roguelikes. Like just generally, like there are like Hades probably still played. Just like
Exactly. So obviously,
just
live service is
playable.
like identified by things like seasons and like a in-game shop and these dynamic elements, right? Apart from that, most games are live service instances, so most games do get like consistent updates after they come out. Even after they are like, even if they were an early access game, right? Not all of them do. I think Hades is actually a really good example though of the game that where they did have a very successful early access for both of them. Where like Hades 1 didn't get updates after it went 1.0 because it was done. But a lot of games nowadays aren't like that, even if they're not live service. And roguelikes especially, I can't think of any like live service ones, you know, in that way. In the way of live services we're talking about. I'm not sure if there are any. You know? I don't know if any live services that have I don't know if any roguelikes that have battle passes.
Yeah.
So it might that would make it make sense as if it didn't happen, because I don't think they're looking for it to be I don't think they're looking for Rocal to be a business venture, you know? Where it's like this is how we make money, but they always want it to be something that people play a lot, and
which
they'll
is probably
retain
the
that
angle
through their
that maybe
normal way of doing updates before seasons. That will definitely keep people engaged because roguelike players don't need that shit, basically.
Yeah. Maybe that's the angle that they're kind of looking at in their head. Is that like Roadcore is going to be its own self-contained game while they continue to make Deep Rock for like forever, right? The Deep Rock never ends, and they just make these side projects every now and then that just wrap themselves up
Which
neatly.
almost doesn't make any sense because DRG's technical debt is so apparent that I wouldn't want them to keep going Deep Rock forever. It's like, it really shouldn't. In fact, Deep Rock really should, like, you know, ideally it would have actually been brushed up to the point of like actual completion now, where it's like they wouldn't even need to. They themselves wouldn't even feel the need to be like, oh, don't worry, there'll be a season 6. But no matter what way it goes, I don't want Deep Rock to. I think Deep Rock should definitely end by its 10th year, like properly. You know, where maybe with a final update as well. So I guess that's kind of implying season 7 and maybe 8, and then like you get 8 with the final anniversary or something, because because it should end. I don't think they see Roku as a side project. I don't think.
No, but they also, it doesn't seem like it's them moving on either. They definitely seem like they intend to go back to Deep forever. Like, so unless they make a decision either way, I really don't know what they're thinking.
But with how like impulsive they are, it could easily come to the point where like they realize that that's not actually how they feel about Deep Rock, and it's like maybe we should actually be moving on. Because we already did by starting Rocal. We moved on, but with plans to not move on. and they might come back to Deep Rock and realize that didn't make sense. And I hope, by the way, if they have that feeling, they understand that that's probably reflected in a lot of people, and that they should just batten down the hatches on season 6 and make it, the actual last hurrah. If they have those feelings when they get to working on season 6. If they don't, I'm sure they'll just carry on and it will still get good quality content. But I don't know if there'll be much of a point when Deep Rock is just getting older and older, and there's like a much more fruitful, tree to pick from.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how fruitful that tree is.
Yeah, but obviously we're expecting it to be quite fruitful.
Yeah, and I mean I haven't looked, but I can only assume Deep Rock is withering, right?
Yeah, and it by all means it should be, because I don't think Deep Rock is the kind of game that the reason why Deep Rock is a live service game is because it was always substantiated by having a future, right? It was always like working. It's almost like the role play actually of working at the company, and there's always going to be some other like venture that the company takes on, something else, some other work that you're going to be assigned once you've gotten through like your current like your current slog of paperwork, something like that. If you were to role play in that sense, if you wanted to, it's like there's always going to be a different task on the horizon that's going to be like change things up and make the work more engaging. So, and I think without that, it makes Deep Rock have less of a point, and that's okay, because by it being like that, that means you have to move on at some point, because it's the kind of game that doesn't work getting updates this rarely, because unless you're okay with it dying in between them, which they kind of have to be. And that's why we've already talked about how roguelikes maybe do have better inherent retention, which means that even if they are like still going to go down the route of they're taking time away from Rogue Core now to go work on Deep Rock after Rogue Core's out, I think Rogue Core's probably going to suffer at least a lot less than Deep Rock has been for them working on Rogue Core. Well, not hopefully. I think that's actually fairly like solid, especially with like it's how new it will be. It just doesn't feel great that we know it's going to have to go through that anyway. It's weird, and that's why that I think their plan to go back to Deep Rock for season 6 is something that I think like I said, I don't think the plan's going to change. I still think there is more for them to say about it. So I think we kind of need to wait. I don't like saying we need to wait a bit, but obviously we do, and we know we needed to wait. We just have a more defined sort of end to the wait. That's fine. But anyway, our next write-in comes from the Moonwalker 87. I think no to both, but I fully welcome them pushing out more paid skins separate from free skins. I would love more opportunities to get Ghost Ship Games some money and get a fun skin in return. I think other live service models come with too high expectations and letdowns. I mean, that second part is probably true. I think live service has resulted in a lot of letdowns, actually. I mean, look at Halo Infinite, right? Or even the first live service game, right? When this, like, literally, I don't think people realize how, like, Destiny was pretty much the first live service game. It's this game that was like, this is going to be a 10-year game. It's going to, like, go on forever, for 10 years. And that's going to make sense. And it kind of just didn't. And so Destiny 2, like, had to happen. Otherwise, that franchise was going to go down the toilet. But as far as them pushing out more paid skins, I'm not sure, because that doesn't have anything to do with the live service aspects of Deep Rock, really. Apart from the fact that they only do it when there are seasons. So I guess he's implying that wouldn't mind them actually putting out more DLC than updates. I guess. I don't know if that's what he's saying. And even though that would make sense, as far as like securing the income that Deep Rock can generate, it also they're clearly, no matter what you think of them, they're clearly dedicated to making sure they're not making any unfriendly decisions. And putting out something that is like a paid DLC with nothing else alongside it is pretty much the opposite of them. So I don't think that's going to happen. And of course, there is the concept of roll call DLC to consider as well, but like that, I don't think that hinges either on how roll call customization would work, unless there isn't any. Do you know what I mean? That's like the only way there isn't cosmetic DLC for roll call is if roll call basically doesn't have customization, which obviously isn't going to be the case. But yeah, DLC is a weird one because I guess it's technically their store substitute as well. So
yeah,
it's weird. It's a weird one. I don't think they should make more DLC for no reason, but I guess I get why someone would want there to be more, because it's something that they could make that they know is going to get paid for, right? Rather than like just a random content update, and that's why they were always bundled together. But that's like also, I guess, why they don't put them out separately anymore. An update kind of means a DLC, and a DLC means an update, because a random content update is technically going to go unpaid. It's not, they're not really going to be directly paid for that work if there's not a DLC to accompany it. But then you think about Roku, right? Post-launch updates. They're not going to be attaching a DLC to all of those, right? That's not how early access worked. In fact, that is one of the big differences between Deep Rock 1.0 and early access. DLCs, Deep Rock's DLC started with 1.0, with Dark Future and Megacorp being put out at the same time. Other one was, of course, the supporter pack right at the start of early access. But apart from that, there weren't any until 1.0, and then they became a part of these bigger themed updates. So, I think it's fair to assume we're not actually going to see Rocal DLC before it goes 1.0, unless the updates somehow justify it. But I don't know if that would even be feasible as far as the type of updates we're looking at between early access and 1.0 Rocal. Yeah. How strange it is to be anything at all.
Yeah, it's just. This feels like a bunch of fog.
No fucking clue what's going on over there.
Yeah.
We
do
have
a little
more of a
bit.
clue, I guess, thanks to those news stuff. But
Yeah. Let's
we
be
don't
honest
know
about
if they
it.
thought about the difficult questions. That's the problem. It's like, yeah, new game. This will be fun. Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
like,
do you know what that
you
is? I
realise-
think that's because they're actually people, and therefore they, like us, don't really like the difficult questions in life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they do have something of responsibility as far as that stuff goes. I think they're very much so like, oh, we'll just make a good game, right? But we're in a state, the industry's in a state where there is a lot more to making a good game than just making a good game, There's a lot that surrounds it, especially, and that's even contextual, right, to their actual circumstances, where they're dealing with the potential of having this other dead weight of a game holding them back, and they're seemingly willing to hold them back. And I don't know if they really bothered to gauge whether or not that sits right with everyone, They kind of just feel like it's how they're meant to do things, rather than knowing that it is. So it's kind of weird. They're weirdos, like us. Real people are weirdos. That's what I'm saying. real people aren't robots. Unlike our next commenter, Red Vernal, who says that really, I think seasons suck in most games if they aren't regular enough. I prefer updates, although I do like the season passes. They keep some form of grind that keeps you feeling like you're progressing. And I think when it comes to Deep Rock's seasons, right? Especially like when you look at content-wise, particularly like 2, 3, and 4, pretty much entirely their worst aspects were like the stuff that they felt like they had to do, like gameplay-wise. Like, oh, we have to add an event and some new enemies and things like this. But I don't think there was really anything ever really wrong with adding like I think the pass kind of thing is always a good idea. Because it's just this defined thing that comes out and is going to inherently give playtime. But like we talked about, not necessarily the kind of thing you're going to need for a game like Road Core, you know? An update to come out and give a defined like amount of playtime that players can work through. It's like with a roguelite, it's just going to be like the playtime that an update provides is just going to be like, how long does this remain a novelty to the run? But when a roguelites are so like involving that you're going to keep playing even after like some of the new content has like become just like a normal part of the game. In fact, you're almost more likely to, I think, you know, once the novelty's worn off. Like in, I guess RoboQuest is actually another, can almost be brought up again, where it's like, I didn't really get anything about them adding new guns, you know. In fact, it started to feel better once the new guns just felt like old guns in RoboQuest. Because I was just so happy to just keep playing. That I almost didn't want to think about having to engage with new content. Almost. So roguelites have such a different way of going about things. Don't they? Mr. Balatro. Fucker.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, I played it last night at Mitchell's phone, my brother, and to be honest, it's alright, but I'm not getting the hype. So there's my stance on the most popular roguelike game recently, which I'm sure Road Core will take over, King of the Castle style. I mean, it is. I'm not sure if it means anything, but I hope they release it before like best games of the year get announced, because it's kind of bad to release a game after that, right? They want to be in their name, or would they even be that for it?
So like, are you talking about the Game Awards?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
or like Steam ones,
okay,
any of those.
Well, I'll say this much: Hades 2 is still in early access, and that I think it's safe to say when it comes to Hades, that's why it wasn't present at the Game Awards, is because, yeah, I mean, it's technically a self-imposed thing, if you know what I mean, like a game being in early access opposed to 1.0, but it's still, when it comes to like things like the Game Awards, it's a very technical thing where if the game's not like 1.0 or beyond, it's not like it can't be in the award at all. It's no consideration whatsoever.
Yeah.
But obviously there is also a category at Game Awards which is best ongoing game, right? Which isn't for well, it's not for early access, but it's definitely for like live service kind of stuff. I think although it's not really, because the ongoing game category is actually bullshit, because Cyberpunk 2077 won because it got a DLC in the year that last year. I don't think that's what an ongoing game should be as far as like winning the award. I guess that's like a bit of a lofty thing about Road Core to think about, is like at the point of like how far they've come with Deep Rock's accumulative clout. Is there any kind of future where Road Core has like a presence, I guess outside of pop culture, right? And like in the industry culture, which is like award shows and
You'll
shit.
ever have rep.
Do you know what I mean?
It's
Like
it's
after 1.0, could it get nominated for best ongoing game? Because I don't think it's definitely going to be
speaking
nominated for
of,
best game of the year.
What
Sorry.
won best game of the year last year? Because it wasn't Balatro.
No, it's
right?
Astrobot.
Yeah. Have roguelikes ever gotten the respect to their name? I don't think they have.
Hold on,
I
I've got
think
to check
Hades
this.
maybe?
Well,
Like,
I was thinking about
even
Hades,
then-
but I'm not sure if it actually won Game of the Year or not. I feel like it might have done. 2020. Awards. Oh, it was nominated for Game of the Year, but it won Best Indie and Best Action Game. Okay, Best Indie Game. There's a nomination, although it really does feel like we've outgrown indie. It feels like indie stuff outgrows being indie, but it doesn't mean it's not indie anymore. You know, there's so many because in where we are at the moment with just games. There's so many massively popular indie games. And I feel that started a while ago as well. That started with stuff like Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale, you know? Like indie games becoming massive. But they're still they're still all indie. Even if they're some of the biggest games. It's weird how like indie just works. Anyway, I think I'll still give you a mention for Gonkus 4223, but I don't think we're gonna extract too much, so let's move on to a far more fruitful inquiry from Codamon1352, which basically says, I think more games should adopt DRG live service model. That's all he's got to say. And unfortunately, I would have to say no. I'm going to be honest with you, mate. I mean, if you mean in terms of principles, yes, but in terms of actual execution, not so much.
I feel like I'm already now registering like how long and how bad it's been, like mentally, like the slow decay of the game in releases. I feel like we're living in a timeline we never even thought of being like a bad case scenario years ago. I don't think we ever conceived that this game would end up in the state it currently is. Like we thought it was only going up. Yeah, they said evergreen, and everyone got their hopes up, and now we're here.
Well, or it was either going to go, or it was either going to continue to get bad, like or worsening seasons, instead of being like just left on a massive high, but still definitely feeling like it's been left, still perhaps a bit unfairly.
Man, being left was the least expected fucking scenario. Like
exactly.
I wouldn't have been surprised if they ended up just fucking it over with terrible updates or some corporate greed or something like that.
Well, unfortunately, because that felt like one of the options at one point. Unfortunately. Luckily, obviously, we're not in worst case scenario. I think far from it. And even then, we're still talking about the scenario as in Deep Rock's scenario, right? And it's definitely not worst case would obviously have been leaving on season 4. But I don't think there's anything about like DRG's seasonal model only works in the sense that they are a company that is clearly guided by wanting to just be like seen as nice, you know, and a friendly company, and therefore very friendly games. And clearly, that's like you just know that most AAA studios are never going to pick up on it, right? Because their ways work of making money. It just continues to work. So it's like, even though what Ghost Ship has done has clearly made them very successful, and like clearly they're in a very comfortable position by just being, literally just being nice to people, it doesn't mean it's a like valid model for a lot of other games. right? In fact, I think a lot of people would be really confused if suddenly all of their like most played sort of ongoing games didn't have a like in-game store. I think it would actually throw some people off. It's just like, where's the currency that I can buy with my real money? Unfortunately, these things are really baked in now, and I don't think looking outside of Deep Rock and like hoping for more people to do that is the right thing. I think it's really just better to continue to hope that Ghost Ship will keep that up, and I think they will. I think the least likely thing to ever happen is that Rocore has like a paid currency, like a purchasable currency. I think that is literally. I think that is literally at the bottom of the list of things Ghost Ship will ever do. So I think it's more appropriate to just sort of think about the fact that Ghost Ship will probably never adopt all of the trappings of AAA live service, rather than hoping that AAA will pick up on the upsides of Ghost Ship's model. Because I definitely don't want them to pick up Ghost Ship's cadence. I'll tell you that much. Like, can you imagine if Marvel Rivals was actually any slower? Because it almost feels kind of slow in a way, doesn't it? Which is really a bit stupid, because it's technically not at all, right? But
yeah, no, definitely not. But its seasons are on the longer end of what people have come to expect. Those kind of games.
Yeah, because it's like now it's like
3 months is quick. 3 months, I guess. 3 months is actually maybe average. And then 4 months is like long. And then
I think
6 months is unheard of. And then a year is unparalleled.
And then 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, well, they're not making nothing game. I think 3 months is kind of how it's meant to be, though, because that's how long a season is. In the real world. Which is why I almost wish we could use a different word for these things, because it doesn't sound quite right, and it's not like they ever really line up. Anyway, I think it's fair to end it on a pretty comprehensive response, which is from our favourite viewer, Mr. Cheese 8097. I do think that overall DRG probably benefited from live service. I don't think the game would be nearly as popular without the introduction of seasons. However, I don't really see a need for Rocore to become live service. Definitely not on launch, which I know they specified is almost certainly not happening. But even then, the live service game model has gotten a little old, to me at least. I'd like to see how Rocore fares on its own for a while, and then maybe introduce a live service component later on. Similar to DRG, if the need arises. And I think that is basically just putting into words pretty much how it's going to go. That's basically just a really well-informed hypothesis of how Rocore's going to go down. It's not going to be a live service game when it comes out, because it's going to be in early access. But much like DRG, it could happen later on. But at the same time, unlike DRG, it might not actually need it that much. And I think that is kind of the essence of a lot of what we said about like Rocore and the relationship it might have to a potential live service. It's like, it doesn't need it. Hopefully it won't ever need it. But obviously there's every chance that it can mirror DRG's lifetime, which would mean that eventually it could become more like that. But once again, hopefully it's not the kind of game that needs it as much as DRG did. So I think that makes sense. And that's a fairly concise stance to have on Rocore's potential live service, or rather potential absence of live service. And I guess the way to put a pin in this would be to figure out if we actually want seasons or not in Rocore. I know that sounds kind of weird after everything we've been through. You could almost probably extrapolate an answer already, but I guess so. If you want something like what other games are doing, like, do I need Rocore to have like a season every 3 months, or I guess in Deep Rock's case every 6 months, for that to be like a definitive timing, or would I be okay with like Rocore having the same seasonal model as Deep Rock, or do I want it to just be like, just do what makes sense for you? And I feel like that's the obvious answer.
Yeah.
Do your own thing, like Miles Morales. He's going to do his own thing, you know.
Yeah.
Don't copy, but also don't be a contrarian either. Is a good way to look at. I think that's a good way to approach everything. Actually, you know, you don't have to avoid like emulating like good things, like other things. I think that can actually be very useful sometimes, but don't fall back on copying stuff just because it's an easy way to figure out what you're going to do with something. That's to say, I think Rokal has a lot of reasons to go down differently than Deep Rock, and the biggest one is, of course, the type of game it is, and hopefully that is reflected in both its updates and its like status as a live service or as a non-live service game. Yeah, got it.
All right.
I've got it. I've got it figured out. I've seen through the Matrix.
Lovely.
As have we all. And I think before we actually leave, I want to thank everyone for recent events, which is the last video that we put out, doing rather well, didn't it? That was nice because
Yeah. You worked too hard on that.
look, I did. I did. I'm not a 9-to-5er, right, who works in a fucking coal mine or nothing, but I'm also not the opposite of busy. And I also don't get any money from this. Really. Not really. So it was an effort. And there's a reason why it took a long time, and I think I'm happy with how it's gone. So I just want to thank everyone for the response to that video, just general sort of numbers wise, views wise, but also the likes and the comments. It's all been good stuff, and I think it won't be soon, but I can't say it would be weird if there wasn't ever more stuff like that. Basically, I'll say that much. Anyway, not until then, until like literally Tuesday, I do plan on putting out the next Overclock showcase on Tuesday, so you can look forward to that, and then whatever the fuck we'll be doing later on. It won't be what I'm about to say just yet, but I think we're probably gearing up to some kind of Marvel Rivals tier list at some point in the next couple of weeks, to be honest. To get something like that out of our system, it would make a lot of sense. Time without doing that. As far as like dipping our toes outside, we don't do that. Probably like at least once every 2 months. I think it makes sense to sort of drip something in that is sort of bleeding over from our other endeavours. Of course, I did kind of plan on making like talking about Marvel Rivals a bit more. Maybe because it's like it is the live service game right now, you know. Because I really want to talk about the idea of like how live service is the kind of thing where even if you're principled against it, there's like a 90% chance that there's a live service game that you play a lot, like regularly. It's like so pervasive, even though at a base level, people who talk about games don't really like it, you know. And yeah, it is just the way of things at the moment, and has been for a while. And that's why I do feel weird about like Deep Rock's manner of live service, because it's like I love everything about this in terms of principles, but it's not like it really works to do what other games live services do for players, you know. It just doesn't come close to the engagement, really, unfortunately. I guess people like buying weird currencies that turn into other currencies and then buying skins with them. But we don't have to reckon with that. And we won't have to reckon with that with Rokor, I reckon. You reckon?
You don't reckon with reckoning?
I reckon with the reckoning. I think the reckoning is coming, but
Oh god, the reckoning is coming.
Can you imagine if this was like I was about to say, can you imagine if we talked about current events? That's what I was about to say. Obviously, I can't. I don't think that would be a terrible thing to do.
What did Elon mean by that?
What Elon meant by that is, unfortunately, you can look into the fact that he's had a lot of weirdly outspoken support for like not outspoken for that, outspoken support for like German far right groups, and he has like backed up like posts relating to white supremacist ideals on Twitter. At the same time, I think that thing was pure autism. I think it was supposed to be like a like my heart goes out to you like gesture.
Yeah.
But he made it like weirdly aggressive because he's trying to be cool, right? So it's like a basically it's like a generic like military like call out. It's like a, it's like hurrah kind of thing, like that kind of cadence.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's literally doing one of those things, a Nazi salute, on stage. At the same time, I don't even think we're at the point. I think we're at the point now where certain people can actually get away with that, and that he's actually one of them. And by get away with it, I mean their supporters won't change anything for them,
Yeah, it hasn't.
But we're not here to talk politics. The thing is, I probably have more of an opinion than I've ever had on political matters, and I don't think that's weird. We're probably in the strangest political time of our lives when you look at the world, right? And like the weird like shift that seems to be happening towards right-wing ideals. Like, that's actually kind of happening in everywhere except England,
It's because the left took it too far. It's that simple.
Oh dear.
I mean, well, at least that's they did.
Certainly,
they just did. But let's not pretend the right aren't going to do the exact same thing now that they're like.
Well, yeah. I mean, look. The truth is, the only reason why Trump won is because he's got fans, where like the Democrats like base of supporters like have a conscience and were unfortunately dejected by how things had gone over the last few years. So a lot of them didn't vote. Unlike right wingers who are just on this train no matter what. I think that is actually a big reason why it happened. It's like, it's not like I even blame the people on the left that much, though. That's the thing. I think I for the most part, I think kind of relatively objectively, the ideals that the left and progressive represent have greater moral standing, but I don't blame the way that voting has gone globally on them. Or if I do, but I don't blame them for how they've like taken the last few years. It's like for being a bit. Anyway, that's no. We're done.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
No. Thank you. Yeah, actually, you know what? Fuck it. I can't bother doing a outro. Thank you, Boxbook Scoot. We'll see you later.